Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the BCAFN Climate Action webinar, Opportunities for First Nations Electric Vehicle Charging Stations. My name is Patricia Rojas, and I am the BCAFN Regional Climate Change Coordinator. I want to start this webinar acknowledging the territory where I live and work, the unceded territory of the Williams Lake First Nation. Before explaining why BCAFN is hosting this webinar, I'd like to share some housekeeping tips. So this session is being recorded, and we will share the link and the presentation slides with all of you. The recording will also be posted on the BCAFN website. If you have any technical issues, please send a text to Joanna Prince in the Zoom chat or call her at 778-945-9911. For questions or comments, you have two options. The first is you can type your question or comment in the Zoom chat, or if you want to speak, please raise your hand and I will invite you to unmute yourself after the presentations. So here are the buttons that will allow you to use the chat or raise your hand, and this is the question and answer button. So if you have any problem with these buttons, please text Joanna or call her. So before introducing our presenters, I'd like to briefly explain why BCAFN is hosting this webinar. Addressing climate change is a priority for Regional Chief Terry Tigi and BCAFN. We all know we are in a climate emergency. So we are working hard to support First Nations climate leadership as mandated by the Chiefs in Assembly in 2016 and 2019. So this mandate directs BCAFN to support First Nations to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions while preparing to face the impacts from climate change. And yes, this also includes supporting economic independence. So today's session starts a cycle of webinars we will deliver during 2021. The webinars are also part of our effort to meet our mandate. So please feel free to write in the chat box any ideas or other webinar topics. So for today's agenda, we have presentations from the BC Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. They manage BC's policies and programs around EVs and charging stations. We also have the Fraser Basin Council, who is responsible for the delivery of some of the provincial programs, and the Musqueam Indian Band. They will share their experiences learned from building 2 charging stations in 2019. A question and discussion period will follow. So here are our presenters. We have 4 presenters today: Cristina Iancello from the province, Jim van der Wal from the Fraser Basin Council, Jenega Asadian from the Musqueam Indian Band, and Ross McCann also from the Musqueam Indian Band. So I will pass the floor to our first presenter. She's Cristina Iancello. Cristina is the director of the Clean Transportation branch at the BC Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, which is responsible for BC's electric vehicle programs and policies. Welcome, Cristina. Please unmute yourself, share your screen, and start your presentation. I will just stop sharing my screen. I'd like to welcome Jim van der Wal. Jim is the Director for Climate Change Programs at the Fraser Basin Council, which is responsible for the delivery of the CleanBC Go Electric Public Charger Program. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Even those of us who are in more rural areas, surprisingly, if you look at the averages, it's not that much for most of the driving, but then there are those times you want to go on those longer trips, and that's what the public fast charging is for. So this is a map of the network that's building in BC, and you can see that, it's we're starting to get quite a bit of opportunities for this, especially in southern BC, starting to have some of these routes that are connecting in other parts of BC, but certainly the north and many of the other sort of secondary routes, which is a little bit hard to see on this map. But we do have many gaps that we would like to fill collectively, and this program is intended to help to start to do that. You know, we've moved over the last decade from cars like the Nissan Leaf that originally came with 100 kilometers or so range to now a number of vehicles that have 400 plus kilometers. So that allows us to travel longer distances, but we're still going to need, we can get from Prince George to Smithers, but we're still going to need to top up along the way for those longer trips. We know these vehicles are coming. As Christina mentioned, there's already seeing significant sales in BC, and there's a mandate by 2040 that all vehicles will be zero emissions. So this is, it's a good time to get ready for this. Even if we don't have a huge percentage in our own communities, it's coming, and it's an opportunity that we don't want to miss out on. So the goals of the public charger program are to fill gaps in the current fast charging network, including Indigenous communities, rural areas, northern areas. And also there are some places in urban centers where there's high electric vehicle adoption and people don't have easy access to charging at home in condos. There are programs to help support that, but we have hundreds of thousands of people that live in condos, and it will take a long time for many of those people to access charging. So that's another gap that we're filling. The goal is to support 80 fast chargers at minimum, and there's also funding to support 60 level 2 chargers. And the reason for that is to ensure that, especially for these stations that are in areas where there may not be a lot of other charging opportunities, that there is a backup charging option if the fast charger is not working. I can tell you as an electric vehicle driver that having reliable service is very important. And so, if there are those times when there isn't charging available, having backup is important with level 2. There's right now about $5 million available, and we're just started to take applications starting in the fall. So there's still plenty of opportunities for other communities that want to be involved. Here's kind of how the incentives look. I seem to have mixed up my slides here. Just hold on a second. For some reason, the slide that has the regular incentives is not here to compare, but so for Indigenous communities, the amounts are higher, percentages are higher. So $50,000 up to 90% is available for stations that are sort of medium power. For higher powered stations, up to $100,000 or $130,000 up to 90%. And up to $5,000 per level 2 station is also available. And this for other applicants, for non-Indigenous applicants, the amounts are slightly lower and the percentages are capped at 50% of the project costs. So we recognize that Indigenous communities may not have the same access to other funding to support these, and we're looking for ways to try and enable that. Additionally, our staff are available to help support people who might be thinking about this but haven't yet put plans in place, they're not ready to apply. So our folks are available to help support people who've got ideas. And so I wanted to also acknowledge that a couple of the staff on my team are also here, Shannon Gilchrist and Jim Gudjonson. And so you'll see the contact information at the end, but if anyone wants to contact them or me, we're more than willing to help. I'll talk a little bit about, this is kind of the boring stuff here, I guess, how the application process works. And so, happy to get into more details offline as well, but just give a little bit of information on this so you have an idea of what's eligible for the program. And we can always have separate conversations for people who are more keen. So Applicants, eligible applicants are businesses, not-for-profit organizations, local governments, Indigenous communities, or wholly owned entities like development corporations, that kind of thing. Utilities or public sector organizations that are located and operating in BC. And so one thing I wanted to just point out, because questions have come up before, is that those additional incentive amounts, the up to 90% amounts, are available for Indigenous communities. So for communities that are planning to own stations, operate them, or they're wholly owned entities. If a private company is locating something on say reserve land, that would apply for just the regular incentives for a business or not-for-profit, whatever the organization might be. The equipment, of course, has to be new. It's not replacing an existing charger, and it has to be in service for 5 years. There are some things around the standards. There are 2 standards right now for fast charging that are common for most vehicles out there. And so they have to include those so that vehicles can access. And it has to also include the common standard, which is called J1772 for the level 2 charger. As well, they have to be OCPP compatible, which I'll not go into that at this point, but basically open source access to data is important for this for these things. The site, they have to be located in BC, obviously publicly accessible all the time. And also we've got some design criteria so that they're accessible for people who are using mobility aids or have mobility issues. So there's an online application form that you can access from our link through to our website. To be able to do all this. Click through, you'll find it. I think at this stage, just in the interest of time, I might skip over some of this in terms of some of the application information. I think this is something that would be best to just talk through with someone who might be interested, and the things that are needed in terms of documentation, incorporation, budgets and quotes and so on. At the point of application, obviously you need to have a project that's you've done some planning on and it's ready to be funded. So a little bit of information here about the site requirements as well on accessibility. If the applicant isn't the property owner, there has to be a 10-year lease in place for that applicant. So say, Petro-Canada wants to, install a station and they've got a property that's on leased reserve land, then they would have to ensure that they've got a lease for that location. Want to see details around the site. One thing to think about these public chargers is it's really, it is about charging, but just like gas stations, it's a place where people are going to be stopping. They're going to be spending some time, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, depending on their charging speed and requirements. And so, it's an opportunity to also attract people outside of the environmental aspect of it, to attract people to local amenities. They're going to be looking for restaurants and washrooms and those kinds of things. And so, from an economic development point of view, it's a good way to try and provide that kind of amenity to if tourism is a priority in your community, for example. And then there's some additional documentation required, finance statements, letters to show that the funds have been approved for any matching, some photos and drawings of the site, and an operations and maintenance plan. And we do have a template to help work through that. The one thing I just flag as well for people to think about is that there are, costs obviously to running the stations. And so you want to plan that out to make sure that, likely, these are not going to be, big money makers in the short term, especially in more remote locations, but you want to make sure that you have a plan to see that the costs are covered by revenues that come in. So here's our contact information, as well as the link to the website that has more details, general information or general email for the public charger program, as well as my contact information. And I'd be pleased to have a conversation with anybody who might be interested in the program.
Thank you, Jim. That was very helpful. So please remember that you can write your questions in the chat or using the Q and questions and answers box as well. So now I want to introduce Yenaga Asadian and Ross McCann from the Musqueam Indian Band. Yenaga is their environmental stewardship manager. She's a hydrologist and she is responsible for the Water, Land and Environment Program. Russ is their stewardship analyst. He works mainly on government referrals and on stewardship initiatives. He has a background in environmental biology and environmental policy. Please unmute yourselves and begin and share your screen.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today and present on behalf of Musqueam Indian Band. I'm Yegana Asadian. I'm the Environmental Stewardship Manager for Musqueam. I wanted to start, Ross, if you can pull up the presentation, please, that would be great. A little bit, I was hired by the band 4 years ago to establish the Environmental Stewardship Department and to build capacity. Upon entering the role, I had to develop strategy aligning with leadership, goals, perspective, and vision, which again, within a few months, I developed an environmental stewardship strategy outlining the processes by which we create a balance of human activities and socioeconomic development, recognizing the need to protect the environment and also environmental quality of every aspect of the territory, which included the land, the air, and the water. The preparation of the strategy began with a review of all the environmental issues faced by Musqueam from the first contact to the present day. I made sure that it aligned with the community comprehensive plan that they've done with the community engagement and consultation. Based on that, then the document was approved by Chief and Council, which again, it's a live document that it will get updated annually. And again, it goes through Chief and Council for their views. Based on the strategy, we came up with a vision and a mandate. Ross, if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. It was done in collaboration with the community, and it was our basically vision was written in Hunkaminam and then translated in English. Unfortunately, I can't speak Hunkaminam, but the translation states that we, the Musqueam, will work together to take care of our territory so the following generations will know how to be self-reliant. We will remember our own history and as well use our traditional teachings to take care of everyone and everything on this earth. Based on this strategy, we came up with different initiatives, different projects, and with the help of the new hire staff and colleagues, we started implementing them. And that's when I will pass this presentation to Ross, our senior analyst, who saw this project through from the get-go till the end. And Ryan, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So just to carry on from where Yegana left off, as she said, why did we choose to install electrical vehicle charging stations? Primarily the main reasons were to basically to support Musqueam's core values, policies and programs around climate protection, also to support Musqueam's community comprehensive sustainable community plan, which had actions to improve infrastructure on the reserve for community members and also for visitors and staff. And also to support the environmental stewardship strategy, which Yegana has just spoken to, which talks about improving air quality and reducing Musqueam's greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, one of the main reasons that we also chose to install electrical vehicle charging stations was to keep up to date with neighbouring municipalities and also with the province as a whole. As Jim and Christina have already spoke to, CleanBC has a number of aims, one of which is to phase out traditional vehicles by 2040 and have all new vehicles within BC that are sold being zero emission vehicles. And we saw it as important to start to support our community in being able to adopt zero emission vehicles, and also staff and visitors. We also chose to try and make it more affordable for community members and staff by having this facility at the administration office on Musqueam's Reserve. And also for visitors who are visiting during work hours, we also thought it would be encouraging for them to be able to charge their vehicles at the administration building. So what the process looked like. So as a team, we sat down and we brainstormed how we would be able to implement Musqueam's environmental stewardship strategy. And one of the things that we decided upon was to pursue installation of electrical vehicle charging stations. So first we took that a proposal to Chief and Council, who approved it, and we're quite happy to see us moving forward with it. And next we reached out to neighbouring municipalities to see what they had done and to align with their standards of what projects they had carried out. So we reached out to the City of Richmond, the City of Vancouver, and also the City of Surrey. We spoke to the City of Surrey's environmental manager, who provided us multiple contacts and contractors who we could rely on to carry out the work in a professional manner. So what we did was we put together a proposal, and we put out a request for proposals. We received about 6 proposals back from potential contractors. At that point, we sat down with all the contractors and we talked about their operational plans and the feasibility of those plans which they proposed. We conducted a load study to ensure that the administration building would be able to handle charging stations. And after we had done all that, we chose the right contractor for the job, and we moved forward with the implementation of the project. And simultaneously to the implementation of the project, we also researched and started to apply for different incentives and rebates which were available from the province at a provincial level and also from federal level. So some of the incentives or the incentives and rebates which we did apply for, one of them has already been spoken to. It was the Workplace Charging Station Incentive Program, which is an incentive from CleanBC, and in our case it was administered by BC Hydro. So first of all, we had to get pre-approval for the project, which was quite straightforward. The application process is very, very easy to maneuver. All the information you need is online, and BC Hydro are more than happy to help you through that process. And we received $2,000 for the 2 electrical vehicle charging stations that we had installed, that you can see on the picture on the right hand side of the screen. The second incentive that we applied for was a federal rebate from Natural Resources Canada called the Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And we applied for this through a group application which BC Hydro submitted on our behalf, along with other First Nations and municipalities. It took quite some time to hear back and to get approval, but it didn't require a pre-approval, so we were able to go ahead with the project and implement it prior to receiving approval for the rebate. And this rebate is up to $5,000 per charging station. So where we are now, we have the first 2 charging stations installed. We went with the Flow Core Plus Level 2 charging stations because they were eligible for the 2 rebates that we applied for. They're universally accepted by different zero emission vehicles, and they are networked, so we're able to control them remotely through a web portal where we can set the prices. We can control how long charging can go on for. We can shut them down remotely, and we also receive remote support from Flow in relation to the upkeep and maintenance of the charging stations. So they are open to the community, administration staff, and also to visitors. So at the moment, we're not charging staff or community members. It's free to make electrical vehicles that bit more affordable, but we do charge a small competitive fee for any visitors who are coming down onto the reserve to visit the office. In total, the project cost around $28,000. This also included the infrastructure around the charging stations. So we had a new sub panel installed on the administration building. There was trenching. There was civil works, which included concrete, new signage, painting of parking lot. And the way we have it set up, it will allow for the easy installation of up to 11 new charging stations as time goes on. So we envision, as more and more community members start to buy into electrical vehicles, and also staff and visitors, that will increase the number of electrical vehicle charging stations that we have in the parking lot of the administration building, to prepare for that transition that the province is pushing forward by 2040. Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, we're more than happy to answer those questions at the end of this workshop.
And I just have to jump in, and in kind of conjunction of what Ross have mentioned, it costs a little bit more because we had to do a feasibility study also, as Ross mentioned, because we wanted to expand. We wanted to make sure we are equipped with enough, electricity and the structure. That's why it costs more. So a study of 5 to 10 year planning about how the growth of the community and the administration is going to look like was part of our studies and implementation at that point.
Thank you, Yenega and Ross, for sharing your experience and knowledge today. Well, now we are, can you see my screen now? Okay, so as a reminder, you can type your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you wish to speak. We have about 15 minutes, so I will start with some of the questions that are here in the chat box. I think the first one is from Leona Hanchett, and she said the incentive is for infrastructure. How does the hydropower get paid for usage? And she also have a second question. Just let me pull this. She's also wondering if the electric outboard, the boat motors, will be included in charging ops.
I can start with the first question.
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
So usually what happens for fast chargers is that there's some sort of charge for the use of the stations. And that's often managed by, there are several network providers that help to manage that. So if someone has either a membership that they signed up for, or they use a credit card to pay for the time that they use these public chargers, and that helps to cover the costs of the hydropower. The one thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is we have a bit of a tool to help calculate, costs and so on. The one cost that people sometimes forget with the fast chargers is that because they use so much power, these are major infrastructure elements here. They also produce demand charges, so that's based on the peak power, and you don't normally see that on your residential bill, say, but you might see it if you're involved in any facilities in your community that use a lot of power. And so you need to keep that in mind, because that can be expensive. So, and not saying that communities shouldn't host them, but just to make sure that that someone has done the work to look at those costs and make sure that it's going to work for you in terms of the operating side of it. It's a very good question, though. The second one was about marine, was it? That might be one that Christina could answer. We don't personally, the programs we have don't cover that at the moment, but perhaps the province might be thinking about that down the line.
Do you want me to read the question, Christina?
Yes, please. I was trying to find it there.
Yeah, it's not in the question and answer box. It was in the chat. So okay. Leon is asking if the electric outboard motors will be included in charging hubs.
It's a good question. We haven't, it's not like we've designed an infrastructure, like a charging station program specifically for that, but I'm thinking if it's like the program that was just launched this morning, one of them is a commercial vehicle pilots program. And the idea is to support zero emission options in, again, everything that's not a car. So, and that would include the marine sector. And that program would provide funding to zero emission marine vessels and the infrastructure that goes with them. So I think that might be an option. The other thing I'm wondering, Jim, actually on the fleets program, I forget right now if we limit infrastructure under that program for cars right now. Do you know? The one that we're talking about launching soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was some talk about having some flexibility for some of these gaps. So yeah. Perhaps that's something we can look at with the new fleet program if there is a, these are probably quite new things for at least marine engines of a big enough size that they need a charger.
Yeah.
So seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd say short answer is we can look at it and probably figure something out. But it would be, it would be good to chat with you, Leona, to see if there's a specific project you have in mind, and then we can figure out what program it might fit into.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Jim. Okay, our next question is from Michael Beck. Are there research and development funds to support the exploration of zero emissions marine vessels? I think Christina is going to answer this question.
Yeah, and it actually ties in nicely to the previous question. So we do, I'd say we have a few options there. One live, the others kind of coming. So one of our programs in that big long list of programs that I showed you is called the Advanced Research and Commercialization Program. And that one provides money for research and development and technology development in the zero emission vehicle space. And so things like marine vessels, R&D on electric marine vessels could apply to that program, or on zero emission marine vessels could apply to that program. That whole call process though has now closed for this year, and we're in the process of seeking additional funding into the program for future years. So similar to the other programs, as soon as we have additional funding or new announcements, I could send those links to Patricia and Joanna to distribute to this group. But I'm hopeful that it's one that'll be refunded. The second thing is depending on what stage you're talking about in terms of R&D, the program that we launched this morning, one of them, the Commercial Vehicle Pilots Program, if the zero emission marine vessel is already a developed product and you want to work with a supplier to pilot it in your community or in your operations, then I'd say that's the program that's open right now that you can apply to. The third thing is there is a program that we're hoping to launch in the spring called the Commercial Vehicle Innovation Challenge. And that program will offer funding to manufacturers or consortiums. So if it's a manufacturer with a community that wants to explore something, to again develop zero emission options in anything that's not a car. So marine would fall under that too. That program's just in design right now, and we'll be going out to consultation on it sometime in the spring. I'm being a bit vague because we're still working on things, but going out to consultation on it sometime in the spring, and then based on the input, then launched this year. So same thing, once launched, we can send around notices to folks.
Thank you, Christina. Our next question is from Teresa William. She said, what is the selection criterion for these rebates? First come, first serve, the number of charging stations in a defined area. I think that's for Jim.
Okay, yeah, sure. So for the public charging program, you know, we're hoping to see obviously a good distribution of stations around BC in different regions, but there isn't a specific, you know, allocation per region. The kinds of criteria that we'd be looking at are things like, you know, that it does fill an existing gap in the transportation network, or it's an underserved area. We'll also be looking at things like, are there, you know, at least some primary amenities, things like washrooms and lighting, Wi-Fi, also secondary amenities like, you know, restaurants or other things that people can use while they're at the, you know, parks, libraries, that kind of thing. Is there space for expansion in the future? You know, have they, has the applicant developed an operating and maintenance plan as part of their application? A few things like that, as well as some more, you know, some other criteria looking at, you know, whether funding has been confirmed, are there the quality of some other aspects of the application. But that would be kind of the sorts of things that we'd be looking at. And if someone is thinking about applying, then we would certainly work with them to help make sure they understood what would help their application be supported. You know, like I said earlier, at this point, we've had some applications, and there's still quite a bit of space available for other communities to participate. So at this point, it's, you know, we're hoping to support all good applications that we can until funding runs out.
Thank you, Jim. And I think Susanna was asking if the press release was public, and Megan just shared the link to the press release. So I have a question for Yenega and Ross. What was the most challenging part of the project for you?
I'll jump in. I think because our implementation coincided with COVID, you know, that kind of, it made it challenging for us to kind of deal and with implementation and building up stuff. But I believe that everything kind of run very smoothly throughout the process. It needed a lot of due diligence and careful consideration and long-term planning for us. I'm not sure, Ross, do you have anything to add to that?
No, definitely the most complicating factor was COVID. Yeah, it made it more difficult for the actual stations to be received and to get the contractors onto the reserve to do the work. So that made life a bit difficult at the start. But aside from that, it was quite straightforward. Once we had a plan in place and we started to implement that plan, it was pretty manageable and went according to plan.
Thank you. And another question for you, Ras or Yenega, is do you have any tips for BC or for Jim to help them to improve their programs?
Do you want to go, Ross, or do you want me to start?
No, you can work away. You take that question if you want.
I think, we were notified through emails and through the press releases about the opportunities for First Nations. And regardless, I think the hope for us a little bit of, because we're still waiting for one of the funding, correct, Ross?
Yeah, correct. We've been approved. It's just we haven't received the funding. Yeah.
So it had a lot for us to kind of go back and forth and get clarity. If, in the process, we can get an idea of how, with the timeline of when and what it's going to come back to our communities, and we're going to get the funding with more of a clear pathway, that would be helpful as we are planning to apply for incentives and kind of expanding from 2 stations annually by 1 or 2 to meet the needs of the community and neighboring municipalities as well.
Thank you. Oh,
yeah, I would say, to add to that, some of the so of the 2 rebates we applied for, there was a requirement for public accessibility, and because it's reserve land, it's Musqueam territory, that was a little bit of a complicating factor, what the federal government defined as public and what we defined as public. So that was maybe something that could be improved upon, and more clarification for the requirements from First Nations when applying for these rebates and incentives.
Thank you. Thank you both. So any last question or questions?
Can I ask Ross a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Just about the publicly accessible, how did that end up playing out in the end then? Because I would have thought as long as community members within the reserve had access, that counted as public. Is that how it ended up being settled, or no?
Yeah, eventually, yeah. So eventually it worked out that way. That
okay.
Because it's accessible to community members and it's public to Musqueam as a nation, then they were willing to accept that as being defined as public. Yeah.
Okay.
And Christina, may I add, because there was an uncertainty because we are private land, that's one of the issues. We are not considered public. Yes, our community will consider us public, but that's after back and forth of kind of a lot of communication between us and the application process. That's what was granted. But before that, it was considered as a private, which kind of a little bit of a clarification would have assisted with us kind of continuing and communicating throughout the process as well.
Okay. No, that's good to know for our provincial programs, because we use, we just use the word public too, and we do mean it to include like your lands, for example, but that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we are out of time. We will have to stop the discussion now. And thank you for your participation today. We know this was short, but any remaining questions you have, please send to the presenters and they will be happy to answer them. Now I will very quickly mention some upcoming web events. First, we have more webinars being planned. Please monitor your emails and the BCAFN Facebook and website, and consider signing up for the BCAFN climate change distribution list by just sending an email to me. And the other event is coming up is we are developing the BC First Nations Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, and we are having our engagement sessions in early February. The dates are listed there. And we are also calling for expressions for interest for First Nations to apply for the First Nations Climate Action Technical Advisory Group. So thank you very much all, and thank you to our presenters, and the slides will be shared in a follow-up email and available on our website as well. We Hope you found this webinar helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.